Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment question comes from DV Amateur. DV Amateur. Now, I'm having a bit of a problem with my brain today, I think. Should have gone back to bed. Got out of the wrong side of the bed. Anyway, this is in response to moving the Korg T1 Cerns to a Korg Kronos. Korg Nautilus, less about colour. Mailbag I did in November 2024. And DV Amateur writes, it's rather strange what Korg are doing nowadays, but it's not all bad. By any means, what I'm talking about is the M1 and wave station sounds being available on the Korg Nautilus. Great thing, except I'd also wish that all the M1 sets and all the wave station SR patches were also available on the Nautilus. I wonder if there is a way to load the M1 card patches onto the Nautilus. Now, this is a really interesting thing. I mean, I've kind of wondered what Korg's strategy has been for a while, if I'm brutally honest. I mean, I think anybody who owns a Kronos has wondered quite what the strategy was for a while. We've kind of seen some stuff arrive on the Nautilus, but not everything. Now, there is their VST. The M1 VST does contain all the sound cards that were factory issued. And I wonder whether the strategy is not releasing them for workstations, but releasing them for the VST instead. Very possible. Yes, there was this recent release of M1 sound set for the Korg Nautilus, but there was no indication that this sound set would ever be expanded. And there still is no indication that sound set will be expanded. But then you've got to kind of think back, and M1 DV Amateur sort of then wrote back and said, I didn't realise the M1 software version running on a PC or Mac had all the M1 PCM program card sets. That is excellent. The problem is that the computer hardware tends to be expensive. I read a real M1 with all the cards likely to be cheaper than the lowest price Mac with a decent audio MIDI interface. Now there is an interesting thing going on. I actually have all the factory cards for the M1 plus a whole plethora of other card sets that were released for the M1 by various different sound houses that did this stuff in the sort of 90s. But, and there is a big but here, is the cards themselves, again, are a little bit more rare. But a lot of people seem to be jacking the price up, which I think is wrong, because they're not worth... I mean, there was a card on eBay the other day, and I wouldn't pay more than about £50 or £60 for it, and it was up for £247, which was the rough dollar translation of whatever it was in dollars, plus another $50 odd to ship the damn thing, which I thought was rather excessive. So, you know, if you start to think about it from those point of view, there are a bunch of profit merchants in the market just trying to take the Michael out of everybody, but they are getting more expensive. But as DV Amateur then pointed out, the card sets prices are not that high because of the level of technology. They're high because of scarcity, and I agree with that. To me, you know, emulating something is always lacking to compare the original. And according to DV Amateur, in his experience, there's there's no comparison that could capture the true M1 look and feel. The Nautilus, of course, does come close, but it's just not the same in his opinion. He doesn't see any issues with the Nautilus having the original M1 and wave station sounds, but it's not going to be the original M1. Now my view, of course, is that I have the legacy hardware. I actually have an M1R, I have an M1, both of which will take the cards, both of which will give the old style sound out. So from my point of view, I prefer the original tech, but that's me, that's what this channel's all about. So why wouldn't I prefer the original tech? I also prefer the Kronos to the Nautilus. And people have said, have you played the Nautilus? And I can honestly say I have played the Nautilus now. I played the Nautilus about 2 months ago. I actually went up to one of the music shops and I played that, and I also played the Roland Phantom. And I do agree that the 88 key Phantom keyboard is absolutely lush. In fact, actually, I also thought the 76 key Roland Phantom keyboard was lush as well. So, but then having said that, I'm not a full-time giggy musician, so my view is I know what I like to play, and I did think both of those were nice. In fact, I actually thought the Phantom keyboard was actually better than the Nautilus keyboard, which a number of people have said to me isn't actually that hard. Although I still maintain that I think the best keyboard, the best action keyboard I have is on the Oasis, and I still maintain that. Anyway, DV Amateur thinks that the Nautilus is a move forward for Korg. I am still sitting on the fence on that because I don't believe the Nautilus is a move forward. It's a move forward, I think, in terms of hardware platform. It moves the platform up. But my biggest issue with the Nautilus is not the Nautilus itself. It's actually the fact that Korg didn't use the opportunity to actually put a 64-bit operating system on the machine, and therefore they have limited its life expectancy in terms of what it can do. So if you go and look at the competition, you know, in the big board space, Montage, Kurzweil, Roland, they're all operating, I'm going to say, flavours of 64-bit, because not all of it is 64-bit, but they're all operating flavours of 64-bit operation, whereas I do not understand why Korg did not move the Nautilus to 64-bit operation and give it a lot more horsepower. The Nautilus could be so much more if they upgraded the operating system. The board that's in it and the board that's in the Kronos can support a 64-bit operating system, but I suspect in the Nautilus, as in the Kronos, that there are other components within the machine itself, like the DSP card, that cannot support 64-bit operation. So I think that's just kind of it. And as I said, I've said many times before on this channel, the problem with the Korg Nautilus is the Korg Kronos. And everyone sort of shouts at me and says, what do you mean by that? Or you don't know what you're talking about. And I do. Right? This thing that sits behind me, my Korg Kronos, is uber functional. It does virtually everything I want it to do. Right? There is no reason why I need to go and play all this stuff and all the other keyboards I've got. I do it because I enjoy it. Right? But I could probably, almost 95% of what I use keyboards for when I'm writing music and I'm just playing for fun, I could do with this. Right? That is the bottom line. It is uber functional, and if you go and look at a lot of artists who are Korg Kronos artists, they have not migrated platforms. They still have Kronoses, and you know, some of the big Korg affiliated, sponsored, whatever they are still using their Kronoses. They may have Nautiluses, but they are still using their Kronoses. So, and this was the problem with the Nautilus, and I've said it so many times, I'm not going to labour the point. The Nautilus was not radical enough to supersede that machine. If you were buying a brand new machine, maybe you would go for Nautilus. If you wanted a machine that was supportable by a dealer network, you would go for Nautilus. But if you were in neither of those camps, why would you not buy a second-hand Kronos? In fact, actually, second-hand Kronoses are pretty much selling for what they were selling almost brand new. And that gives you kind of the big thing. I've harped on about 64-bit software. And I think the other big problem they had when they launched the Nautilus, although they have kind of rectified it now, I say kind of rectified it, is that you couldn't, if you crafted sounds on this thing, you couldn't move them up onto the Nautilus platform. You know, talk about marketing faux pas. You know, how can you release a brand new flagship workstation based on the same technology that your previous workstation works on and not provide an upgrade path? I mean, that is ultimately the Homer reward of the century, really, isn't it? But, you know, I just look at this stuff. I look at people like Jordan Rudess, as I said, stalwart Korg user, still using Kronos. When he was in London recently, had a Kronos on stage. And the other thing I've noticed recently is I've also noticed that the prices of the Nautilus brand new ATs are now sub £1,800 for an 88 key. Now, when this thing was new, many moons ago, right, it never dropped below £3,000 brand new 88 key, and yet the brand new 88 key 18 Nautilus, £1,800. I would be absolutely gutted if I'd actually splashed out £3,500 brand new for one of those things. I really would have been. DV Amateur goes on to say a bunch of other stuff, you know, not being a fan of, you know, the computer-based synthesizers. But the reality is most modern synthesizers now are computer-based. And if you were around recently, you would have seen the Espen Craft video, where Espen Craft basically put a shot across the bows of many of the manufacturers, basically saying, you know, why am I buying a computer? They're ripping you off. You know, it's a scam. You look inside these machines; they're not. You know, there's nothing in them. We've got a small motherboard and a piece of firmware, and you know, you're being expected to pay £5,000 for a synthesizer. You know, it's just not worth the money. And you know, you start to look at that sort of stuff, and you do wonder. But again, going back to where we started with this rant, and this is more of a rant than an actual question response. But where we go back to starting is, you know, it all started with the M1, the T1, the O1W series, the Wave Stations, the Triton, the Trinity, the M3, and then you come on to the Oasis thing and the Kronos. But the lineage and the heritage and the workflow are very, very similar across those platforms. It's just, I do not understand why somebody just hasn't linked them all together and said, okay, if you've got a patch for this, you can move it to that, and there's a program that does the manipulation in the background. And while somebody might shout PGC tools, it will only work on patches that have been made on a similar platform. So M1 and T1 you can move stuff backwards and forwards, but you can't move stuff from the T1 to the Triton, for argument's sake, or to the Kronos. You can move the samples, you can't move the patch parameters. And on that, I'll shut up.